So picture this. The year is 2002. The Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences gets awarded. But the winner? He isn't an economist. Not even close. He's a psychologist. This is the incredible story of Daniel Kahneman, a total outsider who noticed these predictable, kind of weird flaws in how we all think, and ended up causing a seismic rupture in the entire architecture of modern economics. But before we get deep into all that, let me ask you something. Think about your day. When you decide to buy that coffee, or invest in a stock, or, even just drive to a farther store to save a few bucks. Do you think you're making a perfectly logical calculation? Or is there something else going on in your head? That very question, right there, is the heart of this whole revolution. You see, for centuries, economic theory was built on this really elegant and honestly beautiful foundation. It imagined a world that wasn't populated by us, messy, emotional humans, but by these perfectly rational beings that economists sometimes call econs. And the star of this world was a character called Homo economicus. Now, this wasn't a real person. It was a model. Think of it like a flawless supercomputer that always acts in its own self-interest, processing every bit of information perfectly to get the absolute best outcome for itself, every single time. And this model, it was built on a few key assumptions: that we are all just selfish maximizers, that what we want today is exactly what we'll want tomorrow, no questions asked, and, this is a big one, that we make decisions based on our absolute final level of wealth. It was a beautiful theory, but it had one teeny tiny problem. The problem was, well, it was us, real people, you and me. The moment you actually start watching how humans make choices in the real world, that perfect, elegant model starts to show some really serious cracks. Okay, let's try a quick experiment. Just look at this choice. Option A, you get a guaranteed $3,000, no strings attached. Option B, you get an 80% shot at $4,000, but also a 20% chance of getting nothing. What does your gut tell you? Which one feels right? If you're like most people, you took the sure thing. You chose A. But here's the crazy part, a paradox first noticed way back by Marie Salé. A lot of the same people who pick A, when you give them a different but mathematically related problem, will make a choice that completely contradicts their first one. Our intuition, it turns out, consistently breaks the basic rules of logic. And this is where our heroes enter the story. Daniel Kahneman and his brilliant collaborator Amos Tversky. They were psychologists, and they looked at these so-called errors, and they saw something profound. These weren't just random mistakes. No way. They were systematic, predictable patterns in how the human mind works. So what they developed next, it wasn't just a small critique. It was a completely new theory that was going to shake the world of economics to its very core. They called it prospect theory. The first really radical idea was something called the reference point. Kahneman basically said, hey, we don't evaluate things based on our total wealth. We don't care about the final number. Instead, we are incredibly sensitive to changes from where we are right now. The thing that carries value isn't how much money you have, it's whether you're gaining or losing. This S-shaped curve you see here, this is basically a map of our feelings about money. On the right side, for gains, you can see the curve flattens out. That means the joy you get going from $0 to $100 is way bigger than the joy of going from $1,000 to $1,100. We have diminishing sensitivity. And guess what? The exact same thing is true for losses on the left side. Now look closely at the center. That sharp kink right at the reference point, you'll notice the curve is way steeper for losses than it is for gains. And this, my friends, is the absolute cornerstone of their theory, loss aversion. The psychological pain of losing something is so much more powerful than the pleasure of gaining the exact same thing. So just how much more powerful are we talking? Well, their research came up with a number. They estimated that losses hurt about twice as much as equivalent gains feel good. Think about that. Losing $10 feels as bad as gaining $20 feels good. This single insight is an absolute game changer. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of economic behaviors that used to seem completely irrational started to make perfect psychological sense. I mean, why do we overvalue that old coffee mug just because it's ours? Loss aversion. Why do we stick with the default option on a retirement plan, even if it's not the best one? Loss aversion. Why do we cling to losing stocks just hoping they'll bounce back? We're desperately trying to avoid the pain of making that loss real. It's all loss aversion. So this wasn't just about patching a hole in the old theory. Prospect theory basically provided the blueprints for a whole new wing of the economic architecture, one that was built around how we humans actually are. This chart just lays out the difference perfectly. The old model, expected utility theory, was all about absolute wealth. The new one, prospect theory, is about gains and losses. The old model was prescriptive. It told us how a perfectly rational robot should decide. Prospect theory is descriptive. It shows us how humans actually do decide. Kahneman and Tversky's work did a lot more than just poke holes in old ideas. It actually created a powerful, brand new field, behavioral economics. This whole field integrates these deep insights from psychology to build richer and frankly more realistic models of why we do what we do with our money. So, what's the lasting legacy of this quiet revolution that was started by a couple of psychologists? It's that economics finally has a realistic model of its main subject, which is, of course, us. And here it is, the official recognition. The Nobel Committee honored Kahneman for building a bridge between two massive fields of study, and in doing so, he changed them both forever. His work gave economists this brand new, psychologically grounded toolkit for understanding the world. And it's really important to get this straight. This new science didn't just throw out the old one, not at all. Instead, it just clarified its boundaries. That model of the perfectly rational agent, it's still a really powerful tool for analysis, but now we treat it as a useful benchmark, a starting point, not a literal, perfect description of you and me. Which, of course, brings this whole thing right back to you. Now that you know that losses loom way larger than gains, that your starting point changes everything, and that your mind takes these predictable shortcuts, what decision in your own life might you look at just a little bit differently now?